Hello, everyone. I'm glad you're able to join us on TRF Tuesday for this 6th lesson, introducing how you can use Masgutova neurosensory motor reflex integration techniques to release stress and to recover from trauma. My name is Heather Taylor. I've been an occupational therapist for 20 years, an MNRI core specialist since 2015, and I've used MNRI techniques in my practice since 2011. When I first discovered MNRI, I was working in a rural school district with children ages early childhood at age 0, and then in the school districts 3 up until 18. And this school district in particular has very high ACE scores. And it was just simply amazing to see the difference that these children had made using the MNRI techniques compared to the traditional techniques I'd been using and taught and to do in school. I saw differences in their fine motor, their gross motor skills, self-care, their sensory integration, and a notable improvement in their emotional regulation and their stress resilience skills. And at that point, I realized that the techniques I had learned in OT school were teaching from a top-down approach. And with MNRI, we're really working up from the foundation. And it just made amazing differences. So to review, I'm going to go ahead here and share our screen. So in past weeks, Pamela, Isabel, and Rebecca had shared techniques that help us with moving out of reaction and into action, expanding the lungs for deep breathing, releasing past negative protection and survival, staying present in the here and now. And so for this week, we're going to be working on staying grounded and stable. But before we jump into learning about these reflexes that help us feel grounded and stable, I wanted to share a quote with you from Charlie Wardle that I feel like applies to the MNRI work as a whole, and particularly with the 2 reflexes that we're going to be doing today. He writes, "A bird sitting on a tree is never afraid of the branch breaking, because its trust is not on the branch, but on its own wings." And I feel this is particularly applicable because we can't control what happens in our external world many a times. And we don't have to be at the mercy of that, of everything that comes and goes in our life. We have so many skills within our own body that help us to work for our protection and survival, that can keep us safe and grounded and stable. And as we will learn next week, we also have reflexes that'll help to activate our brain potential and be open to joy and well-being. So the first reflex that we're going to talk about today is Robinson hands grasp. And this grasp is, it comes along the first week in our life when our baby can hold on to a caregiver's hand, as you see here in the picture. However, this grasp actually started emerging at just 10 weeks gestational age. And when we were young, as little infants, some of us, our grasp was strong enough that we could be lifted by our grasp alone. So it starts with this phase 1, where we have an indwelling thumb and our fingers are wrapping around. And this is typically around until about 10 days of age. And as we mature and we have more experience with our hands, we get more dexterity, and our hands are capable of doing so much more than before. For example, when we think of infants and toddlers who are learning to eat, they will often do so with that whole-handed grasp and that whole-handed release. But as they age, they'll come on up to about phase 6 here, and that's when they're starting to develop their pincher grasp and can pick up small items like Cheerios with a more of a controlled pick up and a controlled release. So first of all, I'd like to invite you to experience how these different hand positions feel. And for each of these phases, I'd like you to notice how it feels in your particular hand. Does it feel safe? Does it feel strong? So starting with phase 1, with your thumb placed inside of your palm, we're going to grasp tightly with both hands and feel how this feels. So this is that first stage up to 10 days of age. It's one that we often, when we're under stress, actually fall back into So there have been times where I've been driving along on the highway and I realize I'm like, why am I holding my hand in a fist? And I realize I'm thinking about something particularly stressful. But from phase one, babies move into phase two, where the thumb is coming out of the palm and it lays on top of the flexed fingers. And anyone that has had their hair pulled by a baby knows this is a particularly strong grasp that they can have. From there, we're going to move out to phase three, in which we're starting to differentiate. So our thumb is able to extend while our fingers are able to flex. Then we move on to phase four, which is called the hanging grasp. And with the hanging grasp, our hand is learning even more about differentiation. So the distal joint, the one that's far away, and the proximal joint here, both of those are flexed, while right here at the metacarpal phalangeal joint, these are extended. So, as I said, we're learning more about differentiation and having more control over our different parts of our hands. Then in phase five, at about 7 to 12 months old, this is when babies start to begin to point. And so again, this is more differentiation because we have fingers that are bent while one is extended. So there is a different job for different sides of the hand. Then moving into phase six is where we're developing that pincher grasp that we talked about for picking up small items. And the last one here on this chart is phase seven, which is where we have three fingers together. And this is the basis for our nice pencil grasp, that we have three fingers, your index, your middle opposing your thumb, and we can work for handwriting and using other utensils. So in addition to these that you see here on the chart, we also move out into opposition, where I'm going to invite you to use your hands to touch your thumb to your index fingers, and then your middle, and your ring, and the pinky finger. We also have fingers opening, where we move in a rotational way, and we have our pinky finger come up, and then the ring, and then the middle, and then the index, and then the thumb. So we'll try that on both hands. So we have pinkies come out, and then we have the ring, the middle, the index, and the thumb. And we also have the reverse, where we have them closing. So we're going to have our pinkies come in, followed by the ring, the middle, the pointer, and lastly, the thumb. And there's one more to review, is supination and pronation. So supination, we remember it as though we're holding a bowl of soup. And then pronation is where they turn downward. So we have an upward and we have a downward movement. And this one's often used when we're opening a doorknob. So that's the end, moving on. So as I'm sure you're all aware, we use our hands throughout our daily lives to do a variety of self-care, schoolwork, creative, playing activities. And this connection of the shoulder, the elbow, the wrist, and fingers, it just sets us up for being able to do so much. But what might not be as obvious to many of us is that it also really helps with our cognitive function, because this is one of the first times that we are able to understand concepts because we can reach out and grab something. So we can hold on to an item and it tells us about its shape and its size, texture, its temperature, its weight. It also helps us to establish our inner control, because I have a role in my further development. So I can reach out and grab an item that I want to learn more about. I can reach out and choose foods that'll help nourish my body for my survival. And I can protect myself by reaching out for support if I stumble. I can hold on to something. This also falls over into our emotional skills, and that it gives us a sense of perseverance, that we can hang in there when the going gets tough. And sometimes when this reflex is overactive, we sometimes feel as though we're hanging on for dear life. And so in that case, we would want to work on it a little bit more. So in doing so, what we're going to do is I'm going to bring this one back down. And we're going to stop our share. There we go. So we're going to be experiencing this on ourselves. So to explain the hand placement, we are going to be using our thumb and holding it in this part of our palm right here. And we're going to be using that number 2 grasp that we talked about, that one that was so, so strong. So this is the one that we are going to be using for our technique. But before we do that integrating exercise, I want to invite you to feel what it feels like to do some of the other ones. So if we were going to do this technique with our pincher grasp, so you can choose 2 fingers or you could do the 3-fingered grasp that we talked about. If we're reaching out and holding on to our thumb, and if you want to feel like how strong that you're able to hold, and while I am able to hold, I personally feel a little shaky like this, and I know that I could easily move away. So this grasp is really great for dexterity, but not as much for strength. And we can explore this also with that hanging grasp too, that number 4 grasp we were talking about, and that we hold on. And as this hand is trying to move away, I am able to resist in this direction, but explore and see what happens if you're trying to move your hand away in this direction. In my case, I'm not able to maintain that grasp. But if I'm able to hold on right here with my fingers curled, my thumb on top, like we talked about for that phase number 2, if this hand is leading away, my other hand can resist that pressure, whether it's forward, if I try to move off to the side, if I try to move to the other side, in all the different directions, I'm able to hold on and keep my grasp. So that is the one that we're going to be using for our integration exercise today. So we're going to alternate between the left side and the right side. So I'm going to invite you to put your thumb out on one hand, grasp it firmly with the other. The fingers that are outstretched are going to be trying to move forward. So we're going to take a breath and we're going to move forward on the exhale. And then we're going to do the other side. So we have our thumb, we hold on to the grasp, and we're reaching, take a breath, and exhale. And we're going to switch back and forth a few more times. So holding on here, take a breath, exhale. One more on this side. Thumb, grasp, hand is reaching forward, and exhale. And while we're doing this on the next couple, I would like you to try to scan your body and feel how it feels in your body. Are you just feeling the strength in your hand, or are you able to sense it also at your wrist and your elbow and your shoulder? So we're going to have our hand outstretched, holding on, take a breath, and then we're moving on the exhale. And we'll explore again on the other side. We have our thumb, our grasp, and reaching forward. And so for me, this one is particularly strong in my shoulders, I can feel. And just like I was mentioning before about how when I was driving, I would notice that I was clenching my hands. This is something you can actually work on while you're driving. When you come to a stoplight, instead of getting frustrated and things about having to wait, you can say, oh, now it's my turn to practice my Robinson grasp. So you can put your hands on the steering wheel and you can take a breath. And then you can picture resisting against the steering wheel, that you're moving backwards and the steering wheel is giving you your resistance there. So you can also do these on railings. You can have other people help you in doing these as well. So, and another thing to mention is that there was a 2018 study that found that hand grasp, the strength of somebody's hand is actually associated with having a healthier heart structure and function. So on a day where you don't have it in you to go out and do all your running and all the other active things that you do, you can also do your hands grasp, and you are still helping your overall body tone as well as your heart. So, and then we are going to move on. So I'm going to share my screen again to spinal Perez. So spinal Perez is another reflex that emerges early on. It's at 12 weeks gestational age. It's active at birth, and it actually plays a major role in our delivery process. So we see spinal Perez in action when we have an infant lying on their belly, and we gently but quickly stroke along the spine from the top of the hips towards the base of the neck. And their protective response will be to arch their back in order to move away from the stimulus. So when they do so, we're seeing a lengthening of the spine, a tilt of the hips forward, like an anterior tilt. Their torso will arch, and their head will also rise up, and their arms and legs will also flex. So this reflex in particular is the foundation for the whole body communication and the coordination between our core and our limbs. And it helps us to understand our gravity center at S2, where all of our movement comes from. So before we move on to the integrating exercise, I wanted to invite you to play with the spinal Perez while sitting. You can do so, you can do your own tactile stimulus. So what we will do for that, and I can't see myself, so I hope you can see me, is that we will move one hand from the bottom or the top of our hips along the spine and go up, up, up as far as you can reach comfortably. So that right there will be the tactile stimulus. So we're moving up, up, up as far as you can comfortably move. I'll do one more. And then the next motion that we're going to do is while we're seated in our chair, we're going to feel what it feels like to let our hips rock to the front and then rock to the back. So it's more of a rounding. So we're rounding our hips to the front and our shoulders are coming back, and we have some really good trunk extension. And then we're going to round back in. So you can take this back to what we learned last week with Rebecca about the Moro reflex, about everything coming open and everything coming back for protection. So that is it in sitting. And so in our daily lives, spinal Perez will help our cerebral spinal fluid to pump. So as you know, our brain and our spinal cord float in a clear water-like fluid called the cerebrospinal fluid. And this fluid acts like a cushion to help protect our brain and our spinal cord from injuries. It also removes waste products from the brain. So when the cerebral spinal fluid begins to pump, we're helping our brain to get rid of the waste we don't need, get access to nutrients that we do need, and that allows us to have more mental clarity and clearer thoughts. This pumping of the cerebral spinal fluid also helps to detoxify the bladder and bowel as well. Because we're running our hand along the spine, we're waking up those nerves that are associated with the sympathetic system, which help to relax the stomach, the intestines, the bladder. It supports our ability to get rid of the things that we no longer need in our body. And so this can be particularly powerful for those of us that have constipation, diarrhea, allergies, and issues with our digestive tract. This also is a foundational movement for posture. And because we're addressing this movement from the spine, this is foundational for all sorts of postures, whether we're laying down, sitting, standing, and while we're moving. It facilitates that trunk extension that Pamela talked about the first week, and the Moro reflex that Rebecca talked about last week, among others. It also helps us to experience less tension throughout our torso, particularly in our hips and pelvis. Then the next one, it's vital for our vestibular system. So when we were thinking back to when we were talking about the baby reacting to touch along its spine, its reaction was to lift its head up off the surface. So this is one of the first times that we're working up against gravity in extension, and that includes our whole body and our head. And as many of you may know, our sense of balance is actually processed by the 8th cranial nerve called the vestibular cochlear nerve, which is located inside our inner ear. And because this reflex encourages the infants to lift their head up, it's stimulating the vestibular system and all of our head riding reactions. And lastly, on this slide, we're talking about it decreasing the hypersensitivity of the sensory system, in particular the tactile, which is touch, and auditory, which is hearing. So because we're touching those nerves along the spine that go out to innervate all the different segments of skin, we're helping the tactile system, the sense of touch, and we're helping that to become more calm. And the auditory processing also happens on that 8th cranial nerve that we just talked about. And so it helps with balance, and it also helps with innervating our sense of hearing. So the movements that we're going to be doing, I'm going to talk about these right here. So here is that tactile stimulus we were talking about, moving from the top of the hips up towards the neck, or up towards the neck and the shoulders. We're going to later rock our hips into our hands, and then we're going to do this in kind of a freestanding kind of way. So I'm going to stop my share here so you can watch me do that as well. Okay, so I'm going to stand up here. So if you feel more comfortable doing this seated, you're welcome to stay seated. But if you would like to experience it standing, that was wonderful as well. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to stroke along the spine 3 times. So we're going to start here at the top of the hips, and we're going to move up, up, up the spine as far as we can comfortably reach. And this movement should take about 10 seconds from start to finish. So as far as you comfortably reach. And one more. Then for the second step, before we get into what you see here in 2A, what I'd like you to do is to place your hands on top of your hips. And we're going to have bent knees to start. And just feel what it feels like for you to hold your hands on top of your hips and just stand straight. There should just be like a gentle little tilt to your pelvis. And we'll do so again. We'll take a breath, bent knees, and then we'll exhale and stand up. So and we'll do that one more time. So bend your knees, hands on hips, take a breath. And we're going to stand tall. So that is a very gentle way to experience our spinal Perez. And for some people, it might not have been enough information. So I want to show you one additional way that we can do that. And that's that picture that we were talking about in the 2A, where we have our hands on our hips. And this time we're actually going to be pressing both down and towards the front at like a 45-degree angle. So it's a gentle pressure, but we're going to take a breath and we're going to be pushing. I'm going to make mine very dramatic so you can see. I'm going to be pushing to allow that pelvis to move. And then you can feel if you turn your pressure and push into your hands. We'll do that again. So hands on hips. And we're going to rotate our hips back up into our hands on the exhale. And last time right here. So hands on hips. take a breath. Rotate your hips into your hands. So then we're going to combine steps 1 and 2. So you can choose whether you do the knees bent and standing tall, or if you wanted more information and you wanted to push your hips into your hands. So we're going to do up the spine for 10 seconds. And we have hips on our hands on our hips. And then we're going to push or gently stand tall into them. We'll do that 2 more times. So up the spine, hands on hips, and either stand up into them or push back into your hands. And then the last one, up the spine, hands on hips, push or stand up into them. Right. So then that last picture that we were talking about was with all of these actions happening without the stimulus with it. So what we're going to do is we're going to be moving our hips backward. We're going to have our arms bent at the sides, kind of like a goalpost. And then we're going to put our head forward. So we're going to take a breath and we're going to rotate our hips, have our arms up and our head forward on the exhale. And we'll do that one 2 more times. Take, have your hips ready, arms are ready. Take a breath and move your head forward. And the last one. So we're going to have our hips, our hands, and our head. So that gives you a couple ideas of a few different ways that you can be doing your spinal Perez on your own. And let's see, I believe that's the last one that we have. So if there are any questions, I think we're ready for them.
All right, we do have a couple questions in the chat. I'll read them for you.
Mm-hmm.
Is it common to see PTSD clients having hypertension in their finger joints?
It is. It is. There are so many different things, like we talked about with the hands, as far as bringing things into our awareness and our body. And next week, we're actually going to be talking about ones that talk about the boundaries of having too many things within our space. But yeah, just doing those simple little hand movements, that's one really great way to work on those, as well as that just moving forward with the one hand and holding with the other. So yeah.
And this is sort of a follow-up to that. Is it common for all of your fingers to like sort of move as one when you're experiencing this and not being able to move them independently?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Just like we were saying, like developmentally, that's what our body knows is safe. So this is a very safe posture for our hands. And it's when we get out to doing those fine motor activities, that's when our body doesn't generally feel as safe doing so. So as I said, these are wonderful exercises to help along with those.
Here's another one. Can you talk a bit more about the vestibular system and things we can do and how it might have been affected by trauma?
Oh my goodness, that's a big topic.
Well, I guess let's keep it general then.
Yeah. So in general, our vestibular system tells us how our body is in relation to gravity. And so that's what's so profound about these techniques that we're doing here, is that when we see clients individually, we actually start where all of these things begin, is that we will often start by working on a massage table and then moving up towards active exercises. But then for some people, they feel safer when they're upright and doing exercises. So we're able to come at it from all sorts of different angles. But yeah, the vestibular system in particular, it lets us know if our body is upright, if we're moving to the side, if we're accelerating, if we're decelerating. We get so much information through our vestibular system that we don't even know. And it also works very closely with our visual system. So sometimes people have very strong visual systems, but yet their vestibular system needs some work. And then sometimes it's the opposite, that their vestibular system is really strong, but their vision is not, and they can still have issues with balance and things like that. So there's a lot of things that can be worked
on. And this is a little follow-up to that one, and I don't know if you have a great answer. Is there a guide or a resource you could point someone to find more information about that question in particular?
About the vestibular system in particular? Well, in all of our MNRI courses, we address the vision or the vestibular system through so many reflexes, I'm trying to say. Previous to doing MNRI, I actually became certified in the sensory integration and praxis test, which is one of the gold standards for understanding the sensory system. And in that system, we learned a lot about using, being on swings and doing different movement activities. But for a lot of the clients that I saw, those activities were too powerful, and we needed to start back, like I said, at the foundation, at the base level. And so when I started using these techniques, with the kids on the floor, on a mat where it was nice and safe, they actually were able to, progress through all these things so much quicker. But yeah, we have any of the MNRI classes.
Maybe Rebecca, could you put the address in the chat there so people could click on it so they could follow up with that? Here's another one. When hands go into claws when you're stressed, what would that indicate?
Mm-hmm. It's just another manifestation of the tension, that's where your hands feel safe. That's frequently when I work with kids, a lot of times they have a grasp on their pencil that looks like that. And that's what they're using, is that hanging grasp. So we go back and we work on integrating all those different steps in that picture that we showed. And in doing the motions, the dexterity just seems to come along. It's not, once the body feels safe and it knows its jobs and it knows it has these supports, then it can move forward and release that tension.
Okay, and last one here. Can trauma cause imbalance with your vestibular system if you're relying too much on vision?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is the trick of it, is that everything needs to work together and for us to be able to get to our optimal state. And that's part of what we're going to be talking about next week, is activating our brain potential and being open to joy and well-being. And both of those reflexes that we're going to talk about next week have a lot to do with visual boundaries as well as the vestibular system. So tune in next week.